So it's only the 6th of January, ladies and gentlemen, and Rant is already back with probably the worst take on Battlefield that I have seen in a good long while. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Rant, they have put out several articles about Battlefield 2042 and the upcoming Battlefield 6, or whatever it ends up being called, over the past year, and almost without question, every single one of them has had some of the worst takes and is completely and totally out of tune with what the Battlefield community actually want from the game. So I thought this is something important that we should cover and go over to make sure that DICE actually know that this is something that they shouldn't do. Guys, as always, if you enjoy the content here on the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. There will be plenty more Battlefield to come, especially later on this year once news about the next game starts to ramp up. So if you don't want to miss any of that, make sure you are subbed up. And as always, thank you guys so much for the support. So this article is written by one Matt Anderson, and talking about the next Battlefield game, he says the developer has several areas to consider and improve upon as it builds the next game in its iconic first-person shooter series. One area in particular seems particularly right for something of a less is more approach should DICE be willing to take it. And the next section here is called Battlefield's next game should work smarter, not harder. So he goes on here saying the next Battlefield title could do wonders for itself if it chose to take a less is more approach with guns. In a first-person shooter, it's fair to hope for there to be a massive amount of guns. That way, players have a lot of different options to work with. If Battlefield wants to succeed though, it may be best served to work smarter instead of harder, lightening the amount of guns and putting its focus elsewhere. A base number of about 15 guns could be a great starting point for the next Battlefield game. While it could seem like a shockingly small amount of weapons for players to choose from, this is where DICE could focus on balancing the weapons to the best of its abilities while also playing on unique attributes to keep guns from feeling like clones of one another. If it can do that, players will have fewer qualms about the smaller arsenal, given that each gun will feel great to play with. Okay, Matt. It's not about the guns feeling similar to one another. Like, did you not see the feedback? One of the major points, the most critical points around Battlefield 2042 was the lack of weapons and also the lack of maps and just content in general when that game shipped. And the reason people want more weapons in the game isn't because they feel like all the weapons that were in the game were clones of one another. It's simply to have more variety. And I, for one, when I'm paying for a $60 game, and you can bet that the next Battlefield game is going to be at least a $60 title, if not 70 or more, and let's not even get started on all of the deluxe editions and the early access and all the rest of it. But when I buy a fully boxed title like that, I expect there to be some content in the game. And 15 weapons isn't enough, mate. Now, he continues here, and he says a smaller base roster of guns could also prove fruitful for the game's post-launch life. Naturally, as Battlefield is a franchise known for its online multiplayer gameplay, EA and DICE jump at the opportunity to add more content to the games after launch. While a small base roster of guns will be polarizing to many players, yeah, you can bet your ass it will be, mate, it will allow DICE to make season drops more special with greater amounts of guns per season. So, what it sounds like you're advocating for here is for them to essentially make a large amount of weapons for the game, but then only give us 15 guns with the base game, and save all the rest of them to drip feed us, albeit in larger amounts, throughout the seasonal content. Again, if I'm paying for a fully priced game, that is not what I want. Maybe I'm alone on that. By all means, guys, feel free to chime in with your own thoughts and comments down below, but this just sounds completely backwards to me. I'm a consumer, you're all consumers, and here on the channel I try to advocate for the consumer and think about what is best for us, not for EA and DICE, but Matt here seems to kind of have things a little bit backwards. He says a small gun count in the base game may seem like a downside to some fans, but the post-launch content could help mitigate that. If DICE can commit to a solid quality of guns, it could ensure this new game's total number of weapons doesn't stretch as high as Battlefield 4's astonishing 107 guns. Finding a nice middle ground between that massive number of guns and the comparatively smaller number of guns in a game like 2042 would be a blessing for DICE's next game. What? Dude, like, everybody is praising Battlefield 4 and the games that have come after that, Battlefield 1, for the amount of guns. It's no secret that DICE and EA are clearly trying to slowly but surely shave and reduce the amount of guns that are in Battlefield games as each iteration comes out, so that we will get more and more used to there being fewer guns. And believe me, I'm not assuming that the next Battlefield game is going to have anywhere close to 107 guns, okay? I just don't think that's going to happen, but I certainly hope they are going to listen to the community feedback that there will be more guns on release than there was in Battlefield 2042. And if I recall correctly, I think it shipped with 22 guns, and can you remember the negativity around that? And now this guy is advocating for us to have 15 guns. So, do you even realize how many different varieties of weapon there are in a Battlefield game? Like, have you even played the game? There are assault rifles, SMGs, LMGs, sniper rifles, marksman rifles, and shotguns. And that's if you don't have a 7th category, like all of the weird wacky weapons like the crossbow and stuff like that. So let's just say there's going to be 6 categories as usual. If each of those have 2 weapons, which is like nothing, that's already 12 weapons. So then let's say with the other 3 you toss in 2 more assault rifles and 1 SMG, that is going to give us 4 assault rifles, 3 SMGs, and then 2 of all the other 4 categories. Do you think the community is going to react positively to something like that? As long as you tell them that it's okay, guys, once the seasonal content starts to come out, instead of getting like 4 new weapons, we're going to get 8 new weapons each season. I honestly think people want both. They want more weapons on release than we saw in Battlefield 2042, and then when the seasons come out, they also want even more weapons there. Now, he does have a point that yes, a lot of the weapons do become very close, and there's a lot of homogenization between the weapons. They start to bleed onto the territory of each other. If one weapon's been kitted out to be sort of a crossover between an assault rifle and an SMG, you'll also find other weapons that end up being like that, and a lot of the time they're pretty much interchangeable. But really, I think it's just about having a new weapon to level up, diversity, right? Just doing something different, unlocking some new skins, not necessarily picking up a new weapon to have a completely different game experience. So yes, of course, if they cut out a lot of the weapons, each and every one is going to be far more unique. I mean, if that's the argument though, why don't we just have 1 assault rifle, 1 SMG, 1 LMG? Guess what? Then each one of those is going to be super unique, and we just don't need to add any more in the future. So he finishes up here saying, a smaller count of weapons may not be the only area where a new Battlefield game would take a less is more approach. Recent reports have indicated that the next Battlefield game will return to the standard 64-player matches as opposed to the 128-player matches in Battlefield 2042. Given the smaller number of players in a given game, it makes sense that DICE would work towards a more concise number of weapons alongside it. What? No, those things are completely like mutually exclusive, dude. Just because you have fewer players in a battle doesn't mean we want fewer weapons to choose from. Like, what? Do you even play Battlefield? Like, I am so dumbfounded. And the reason they're cutting the game down from 128 players to 64 is that 128 players just doesn't work as well. It doesn't play as well, okay? It makes for more boring maps. The maps have to be larger, they're more open, they're not as interesting. There are wide open swathes of grasslands and deserts that you have to tread through to get to a flag because the maps are just too big. And that is an area of the game that at least I believe where less is more. The same cannot be said about weapons. So last paragraph here, he says the next Battlefield game will have a long way to go to win back the fans' trust following some of Battlefield 2042's controversies. A smaller weapon count may be a sticking point for a new game, but it could benefit the next game in the long run compared to the current title on the market. If DICE can focus and work toward a smarter, more balanced set of weapons, the next Battlefield entry could be in a great spot compared to its predecessors. Well, you know what it's going to need to be compared to now is Delta Force, because that's kind of the new kid on the block, that's what's sort of hot at the moment. And do you know how many weapons that game has in it? 51. 15 of them are assault rifles, so it has as many assault rifles as this guy wants to have total weapons in the new Battlefield game. And by the way, I'm just thinking now, I completely forgot about pistols as well. So if there's like 2 pistols, then that's literally like 2 of each weapon category. I just don't really know what to say about this anymore, guys. So thank you, Matt Anderson, for telling DICE and EA exactly what not to do with Battlefield 6 in 2025. That is really not going to go down well with the community at all. Now, as for what DICE are actually doing, everything we've heard so far about Battlefield 6 has sounded pretty positive. Apparently they're going back to a more traditional class system, they're going back to 64 players again, it's going to be a more traditional modern warfare game, like Battlefield 2042, but hopefully less silly, and I believe they're also getting rid of the specialists. So everything we've heard about the game sounds good so far. DICE at the moment, of course, have their heads down, they're hard at work on the game, we haven't really heard too much about it, but I can only expect that as we get closer to the summertime, things are going to start to heat up in that regard, and I will be doing everything I can to bring you guys all of the important news as we get it here on the channel, so make sure you are subscribed if you aren't already. Leave me your thoughts and comments down below, guys. Leave a like as well if you enjoyed the video, that always helps me out, and I'll see you all in the next one.